Hello, a very good morning. Welcome along to Ireland Dame. It is Monday, the 22nd of April.
And it is great to have you with us as we kick off a brand new week.
First up this morning, we are going to be discussing the weekend sports, including Clare fans. Clare and Limerick, it was a mighty clash in Cusack Park. Lots of GAA over the weekend. Of course, a tense penalty shootout at the FA Cup semi-final yesterday. Oh, here we go. United 3-0 up to lose that and then come back and win it in penalties. We're going to be discussing that at 7:15.
At 9:20, jumping forward, we're going to be speaking to the Ryan Whitty comic and actor Helen Lederer. She'll be talking all things Ab Fab and her recent role on the Corrie Couples. Looking forward to that. Her flirting with Ken Barlow.
Then at 8:15, we are going to be talking all things favours and ask whether it's okay to ask for one. So we want to know what you think about this. Would you ask a neighbour for a cup of sugar, milk, a ladder?
A ladder. That's a thing that is always like, Harriet, can I borrow your ladder?
There you go.
That's the thing.
Are you the person in the village who's got the ladder?
The ladder.
Or would you go to the shop? WhatsApp us on 0896 111 111, or the day of asking for favours that they gone?
Is it over? Is it something that you've created in your community? Yeah, interesting. We're talking about that in just a little while. A man, he's mad for lashing out the favours all the time. Hi, Alan.
Would you ask for a 50? Would you? Would you go to your neighbour and go, I'm stuck, you wouldn't lend me a tenner?
No.
Is that a favour?
No, that's not a favour.
But I give it back to you, it's a favour.
Well, if it is, if you're stuck for money, we'll give you a tenner.
There you go. Now,
you're never stuck for money.
He's stuck for money.
Plenty to come on today's show, including problematic posts on TikTok in our tech news, dainty and delicate delights in the kitchen, and we find out what germs might be lurking in your makeup bag. Yeah, it's not very nice. Now, Derek is celebrating Planet Earth at Powerscourt this morning. Good morning, Derek. How are you?
Good morning, Al. Captain Planet reporting for duty, and we cannot get over the sunshine we had at the weekend following all that rain we've had, I suppose, over the last 4 to 5 months. Anyway, out there today it looks like good sunshine, especially across eastern and southern parts, more the way cloud cover once again through parts of the north and into the west, with showers beginning to edge in towards the back end of the day. Now, we're down here in the Garden County this morning. In fact, we've landed here at Powerscourt Estate. They're celebrating their Tulip Festival, so we're going to be looking at thousands upon thousands of flowers right across the morning. It is a kaleidoscope of colour, so we're going to be taking you on that tour a little bit later on this morning. Guys, look at this. Look. Blue. No rain. We're getting carried away with ourselves.
So good, Derek.
Good morning.
It's time now to take a look at this morning's paper, starting with the Irish Times. The headline there: criminals found with shotgun, Garda seized in 2009. A pump-action shotgun seized by An Garda Síochána, which should have been in secure storage as evidence, got back into the hands of people involved in serious organised crime. A criminal investigation is now underway.
Serious injuries in road crashes are twice official rate. That's the front page of the Irish Independent. The number of people seriously injured in road traffic accidents is almost double the figure previously recorded to research by the RSA. Figures showed that between 2014 to 2022, there were more than 18,000 casualties hospitalised with injuries from road traffic collisions.
The Examiner's front page: 22 teens in care of state missing. Almost 30 teenagers have disappeared this year from state care, with one teenage boy who's 14 years old missing for 2 months. Repeated disappearances of children from state care has sparked calls for better controls.
Take the balaclava out of our politics is the top story on the Daily Mail. In the wake of a series of sinister confrontations, political torrents for the ongoing softly policing approach to the hard right has ended, with Justice Minister Helen McEntee coming under pressure from her coalition partners and within Fine Gael.
The Star leads with boy 7 dies in hotel pool tragedy. Tributes have been paid to 7-year-old Shay Lynch, who drowned in a hotel swimming pool whilst attending a birthday party.
Yeah, the Mayor also goes with Shay had a bright smile and a kind heart. In a statement last night, Shay's school said, "Our school community has experienced the tragic death of our beloved pupil, Shay Lynch."
The front page on the Herald: a dignified and inspirational search for justice. Taoiseach Micheál Martin said a new redress scheme for the families of the victims of the Stardust disaster is something that needs to be considered in addition to the state apology.
And finally, the Sun leads with Beck Together. Victoria Beckham lines up with her fellow Spice Girls at her star-studded 50th birthday bash. Stop right now.
Thank you very
Would you go back? Would you love to go and see them
If they came back, I would be there in a shot. I watched that clip of them dancing to Stop about 10 times yesterday. And then when he gave her a piggyback out of the party.
I didn't see it.
You didn't? It's on the front of the paper.
Oh, I know. That means I've definitely seen it. Anyway, coming up after the break, we're going to be sport. There was sport on at the weekend. I was watching
He's a
that
sports star.
instead.
He's a sports star. There we go.
Yeah, lots to discuss.
Including, yeah, we are going to be talking loads of things. We'll touch you in a minute on Ireland Day. Welcome back now from Limerick's victory over Clare in Cusack Park to Liverpool reigniting their Premier League title bid. There was lots of sport to keep us entertained this weekend.
There's an awful lot of sport this weekend. Here with their thoughts is Gavin Cooney from the 42.ie and former Dublin footballer Paddy Andrews. Good morning.
Good morning.
To you
both. Good morning,
guys. A lot to get through here this morning. We're going to start off against Clare against Limerick. What a cracker of a match.
Yeah.
But interesting, just Eamon Sweeney saying Lohan's banner again proved there is no worse enemy than the enemy within, because they had a 14-point lead and lost it within a space of a 13-point turnaround in 14 minutes.
Yeah, it was. It was the Munster Hurling Championship is the gift that keeps on giving. So it was unbelievable. Waterford beat Cork as well down in Waterford. Davy Fitz reigniting his own kind of managerial career. But the big story was obviously in Ennis. We were speaking about crowds over the last couple of weeks, that the GAA weren't getting big crowds in, but all weekend, the weather obviously helped.
Yes.
There was brilliant sellout stadiums across the country, but Ennis looked amazing yesterday, and it looked like the National League champions were finally going to get one over on John Kiley's All-Ireland champions. Limerick were really slow to get out of the blocks for the guts of 45, 50 minutes, and Clare were full value for their lead. And in the space, there was a 10-minute period. Limerick rattled off 3 goals, and just their power, that running game, Keane Lynch, Garrod Hegarty, all the usual suspects just stood up for Limerick, and they just dominated Clare in the last quarter. And there was a lot of talk that they are probably the best 2 teams in the country.
Yeah.
Kenny might have something to say about that, but it felt like it was a big moment for Clare to back up their National League win and hopefully beat Limerick on the first day of the championship. But Limerick had all the answers coming down the stretch.
But it took a while, because normally when Limerick come out after half-time, we're ready for that step forward and then to go, calm down.
15 minutes
But
after
it took,
that.
because you're talking the last 10 minutes and you're sitting there going, sorry, what's happening here? 2 goals have just happened. Like, it was phenomenal.
Yeah, trying to beat Limerick is trying to, like, tame lions. Like, the first moment you show any weakness or complacency, you're dead. And that's what happened to Clare. They were 9 points up. They brought Tony Kelly back from injury. Huge roar around Ennis. They're like, what a day for Clare fans. And then, blink of an eye, 3 goals conceded.
But even the atmosphere in the ground as well. Ennis was full, but Limerick were a little bit off. They were hitting a lot of wides. And it seemed a bit flat. And this is about 50 minutes in. And you just think Clare are going to kind of steamroll this, just close the game out, but Limerick in the blink of an eye turned it around. That's why they're the champions, that's why they are.
But Clare were phenomenal. Like, it's important to say Clare were so good.
For 50 minutes.
Yeah,
I know.
As you're saying, it's mentally. It's turned into a bit of a mental block, almost, you might question, when it gets to these championship matches.
But Tommy, I wouldn't say it's just Clare. I think it's any team that plays Limerick.
Well, it's the same. It was the All-Ireland final last year. Wasn't Kilkenny against
Kilkenny were leading at half time.
They were dominating them in the first half, and Limerick just were able to flick a switch.
Get that running game going, they're so powerful. Teams just cannot live with them, and that's the challenge over the whole summer. But it was a brilliant day for GAA.
It was brilliant. Well. There was some great matches in the football as well on Saturday. Obviously, Donegal beating Derry. Like some fantastic matches. But even Mayo beating Roscommon in the Connacht Championship as well.
Yeah.
Mayo just showing again that they're trying to step things up again.
It was kind of a tight game. You weren't sure which way this was going to go. Both teams had an up and down National League. Obviously, Roscommon were relegated from Division 1. Big crowd in Hyde Park as well. And again, Mayo probably just second half, they kind of upped the intensity as well, and Roscommon couldn't really live with it, particularly the guys coming off the bench for Mayo. They progressed to the Connacht final. They play Galway in 2 weeks' time. Galway were nearly beaten by Sligo. They needed a last-minute goal on Saturday to progress. So there's no real teams outside of Donegal pulling up trees in the football championship. But the big story from the football the weekend was obviously Donegal
Beating Derry.
going to Derry,
Yeah.
beating the National League champions and one of the All-Ireland
Well,
favourites.
Derry, all this talk about them being right up there with Dublin and Kerry to do the job, and Jimmy's winning matches again. It's unreal.
He's back again.
So weird to see you being excited about football. That
I
never
know.
happens. Look at that.
Golf was
Amazing.
quiet this weekend.
Amazing. The golf was quiet. OK, let's move on to the Premier League. And Liverpool have gotten the monkey off their back. They won, Gavin.
Yeah. So they've been pretty bad wobble for Liverpool in recent weeks. Had lost last weekend to Crystal Palace. Won't be coming to Dublin for the Europa League final because they got knocked out by Atalanta. Back on track somewhat with a 3-1 win against Fulham on Sunday. Necessary that they did win. Still, Man City, I think, are a point behind themselves in Arsenal with a game in hand. So.
And Arsenal are at the top on goal difference.
Yeah, on goal difference only. So it is tight. It does have an illusion of being tight when you look at the league. But Man City have room for error now, and they rarely need even that.
And now that Man City are knocked out of Europe as well, it means that they can fully focus on the Premier League. I'd say Liverpool and Arsenal were just hoping that they were going to concentrate on the Champions League, but they got locked out too last week. There's a lot of controversy at the other end of the table, though, which was quite interesting. So Everton up against Nottingham Forest, both of them in the relegation battle with Luton as well. So talk to us about what's happened here, because was it Nottingham Forest put out a tweet?
Yeah, Forest have lost their heads completely. So Forest beaten 2-0 by Everton at the weekend. Had there 3 contentious penalty decisions that didn't go their way. You know, they could easily have had penalties for one, if not all of them. But the reaction after was so far beyond what's acceptable, it's untrue. Within minutes of full time, the club put out a statement on their social media accusing basically of the VAR of being susceptible to corruption.
3 extremely poor decisions, 3 penalties not given, which we simply cannot accept. This is from the Nottingham Forest official page. We warned the Premier League management that the VAR... So the referee who's in charge of VAR is a Luton fan, and the 3 of them are all locked in a relegation battle. Which, to be fair... It's hard because the referee has to be impartial, and I suppose a Luton fan making these decisions. Is there a reason to question these things? No, Paddy.
No, I don't think so.
That's a spicy tweet to put out.
Everyone has to come from somewhere. These people are being employed because they have integrity and because they're objective. And for people to publicly question that is very damaging for the game itself. And it's very damaging for the VAR. I mean, their lives are difficult enough without Nottingham Forest.
But if you're not a fan of anyone, you've got Alan Hughes reffing matches. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not what do? You can go back and see from a child now with life on social media to be like, who were they a fan of when they were a child?
There's about 20 VAR officials, so why not just move? All they said, they flagged it before the match. Could they change the Luton fan with another VAR? Like, he could have easily done the Liverpool match.
Yeah, but then if I mean, there's like Luton, there's a load of teams in and around Luton. Like, if you're going to make these allowances for this one team, there's 3, 4, 5 teams, and then all of a sudden you're giving in to one team's paranoia. That gives an excuse for 19 other teams to vent their paranoia and have decisions made in their favour as well.
But it's so rare to see an actual club statement. Like, I'm sure there was thousands of fan statements like that, and that's fine. That's part of it. But for clubs to go down that road, I think it opens a can of worms. Like you're saying, Gavin, if there's concessions for one, where does it stop?
And did he get it wrong?
Yeah, there were definitely mistakes. There were 100% mistakes made.
But there always are.
This is huge money. Like, this is huge money. And for a club, you can see how they believe they were totally wronged. To go out there and make a statement, because they're going to have a massive fine for that.
Yeah.
But they said that they're going to take proceedings potentially as well if they can.
Yeah, I mean, let them off. I don't really know what they can do, but like,
but when it comes to other, like for years, Wayne Barnes or something like that, would be like, oh, they hate the Irish. Do you know, there's always been this thing that this ref hates this team.
But I think in rugby, we would always be able to talk to the referees or the refereeing commission before a match and flag issues.
Yeah.
So I kind of think Forest had like...
You're with them, Tommy.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I think that they could have because this is before the decisions were made, they flagged that there's a conflict of interest here.
But then you bully it all the time. Like, then you're like putting pressure all the time, right?
Yeah,
like,
I'm more with you here, I have to say, than you, Tommy. I think like what Forest here are doing are opening a can of worms, and like they're out there after defeat accusing a referee of being susceptible to corruption.
Yeah.
Like, that's
no, they're not. They're saying that they flagged it before.
Yeah, but because they believe he would be influenced by the fact he's a Luton fan.
Anyway.
Ergo
We've
open,
like-
to,
yeah.
open to corruption.
Tommy's a Luton fan.
Let us know what you think. Stirring it up here. Do you think that teams should be able to? I don't even know what the
Next thing
question is
it'll
on
be-
this.
It'll be Johnny's under 10. Well, that father knows that father from that
does it
team.
stop?
So there we go.
Where
I'm
does
saying
it
if
stop?
Tommy is that Tommy is right.
Is Tommy
Or
right?
can referees even be seen to be
Everyone
fans of
always
any
thinks
team?
Tommy's
Gavin Cooney from the 42.ie. Great to have you with us, Gavin. And Paddy Andrews, former Dun footballer as well. It's Football Pod. Thank you very much,
Thank
guys.
you so much, guys. Get in contact. 0896 111 111. Coming up next, we're going to have what's in the papers.
Yes, see you after the break.
Welcome back now. As the latest GRA conference, it's set to take place in Mayo this week. Concerns from the force will be raised, but there will be no Minister for Justice, Helen McEntee. She is not attending.
And no Commissioner Drew Harris either. Good morning to Sinead O'Carroll from the journal.ie. Great to have you with us, Sinead.
Good morning.
So, yes, Minister McEntee has... so Drew Harris was not invited.
Yeah.
And Minister McEntee has decided to side with him.
Yeah, so it's the first time that neither of them are going to be there. Usually the GRA conference is kind of a set piece, and it's kind of a set piece for media as well as kind of on the beat Gardaí, that, you know, the Commissioner goes, he has kind of a first kind of speech, and the Justice Minister, and they kind of do their official kind of things there. And that's not happening for the first time this year. Drew Harris wasn't invited because the GRA have no confidence in him. You've covered that before. You know, they had that vote. They've said they've no confidence in his leadership. Wasn't invited then, and Helen McEntee decided, because he wasn't invited, that she shouldn't go either. So they are having this conference, and they are, you know, have a lot of things to discuss. One of which is that they feel that there's an incorrect balance at the moment between internal disciplinary regulations and the execution of those regulations with what the police have to do on the ground, with what the guards have to do on the ground. So that's one of their kind of big talking points today, as well as the theme of the conference over the next couple of days is is it a job worth protecting? So
It's a job.
It's a job.
Not is it? It's a job worth protecting. Yeah. So that's kind of what it is. But there is obviously huge issues with the amount of people who are retiring, with the recruitment issues, and the guards not feeling that they should be heard, that they're being heard. Obviously, there are issues with Drew Harris. But Helen McEntee, should she not be there as the Justice Minister, regardless of whether
with all
Drew
this
Harris is
talk of
invited or
law and
not?
order since Simon Harris has come in, he's stuck by Helen.
Yeah,
So
like this is a political hot potato, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's a big decision for her. Who does she need to keep on side more directly? The Commissioner, who she works with, but they're not meant to be working hand in glove. You know, she's meant to have somewhat of a relationship with him that'd be more like boss and
exactly.
employee, but also could she be seen to undermine him? Would that be a bad thing by going? So it is there's probably a wrong answer and a right answer either which way.
If there's so much talk about law and order at the minute and trying to raise the morale of the police, the guards at the minute as well, whenever you're siding with a commissioner who's got a 98.7% of no confidence vote against him, like it seems like she was obviously advised to do this, but again, you'd have to question where this advice is coming from.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason, one of the main reasons for the lack of confidence in him is that what people see as an overzealous approach to disciplinary. So, you know, guards in the community say they're afraid to pursue fleeing criminals because they think if something happens, they will be prosecuted for trying to go about their job in good faith in the best way possible. Yeah. And then they feel like they don't have the tools that they need to have for what's happening at the moment. And we've seen, and like a very related story on the front page of the Irish Daily Mail, take the balaclava out of our politics, but also off our streets. So, you know, over the weekend, we saw you know, masked people outside Roderick O'Gorman's home. So I think there's always been kind of an unsaid rule that you don't protest outside politicians' homes, but this wasn't a protest. This was intimidation. And, you know, people going with masks. I don't think anyone thinks that that's the same as protecting protests or protecting free speech.
Political tolerance for the ongoing softening policing approach to the hard right has ended. So Roderick O'Gorman, Helen McEntee is now obviously under pressure from the coalition coalition, that she
Yeah.
needs to start acting.
And they have to decide what that looks like. So there's very few numbers who would be in that hard right or far right, or even if you don't even put politics into it, that just want to intimidate or kind of don't like how democracy works.
They've got an issue with it, and that's what's kind of happening.
But that's
Red pill, blue pill.
how that works when there's such a small group and you don't want to increase their numbers. That's what Drew Harris has to figure out.
Very quickly, the front of the Irish Times, Conor Lally, criminals found with shotgun, Garda seized in 2009, and it's actually been taken in by the Gardaí from serious crime organisations twice involved. How in God's, that's a huge issue. How a shotgun that the Gardaí had got back into the hands of criminals. That's an issue.
Well,
Larry,
listen, let us know at
crazy.
home what you make of this with Helen McEntee maybe not turning up to the GRA office conference and what you make of her at the moment. 0896 111 111. Let's get to this other story. So almost 30 children in state care have disappeared this year, and 22 of them still unknown where their whereabouts are.
Yeah, so those figures might sound shocking to people, and you have to remember we're only in April as well. So when we say this year, it's a very short period of time. This has been an issue every
year we have this story.
Yeah, we have this story. So there's obviously a lot of complexities and vulnerabilities within state care. One of the big issues and one of the big concerns when children in care go missing is that they're very vulnerable to sexual exploitation, and there have been major reviews and reports into this. Protecting Against Predators was one by the UCD research group last year, and some of the researchers spoke to the Irish Examiner for this story, and also spoke to one of our reporters in the Journal a few weeks ago, because a group of these children in care are also unaccompanied minors from various asylum seekers, international protection, including Ukrainians who have come over and are very vulnerable to sexual exploitation. EMA reported that at least in one instance there was so many concerns from the private operator of the residential care that this teenager was staying in, that they dropped them off to Tusla office because they were so concerned that they couldn't protect
a 13-year-old boy, their 13-year-old,
17-year-old girl has gone missing 6
Tusla
times.
and the guards have said they are trying to figure out, how to make sure that if they do go missing, they don't stay overnight. They don't stay for 24, 48 hours, because that means they might become, very reliant on someone who might be grooming them or exploiting them. So it's about reducing that time and trying to figure out how exactly to protect them.
It is World Earth Day today. We have Derek out and about this morning protecting the planet. And
we were singing Captain Planet earlier. You remember the theme tune?
Remember that? Do you remember Captain Planet?
Captain
the cartoon?
Planet, he's a hero, gonna take pollution.
So,
down to zero.
52% in a survey conducted by Repack. So 52% of people don't recycle their waste properly.
Yeah, things like not knowing that it has to be dry, it has to be clean, it has to be loose.
What are you looking at me? I am. The whole washing out jars and stuff, though, and and it will be dry. Do you mean it'll dry in the bin?
But it's already contaminated then.
So
it's contaminated.
You've changed the makeup, the molecular makeup of the cardboard, so it can't be recycled.
And once you put it into the bag with all the rest of the
cardboard.
stuff, the whole bag then is contaminated. So it's not just that one thing, it's like the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's what people don't know.
So if I have a wooden box and it gets wet, and then it's dry, and I put it into the recycling bin. A cardboard box. It's Monday morning.
I'm going to throw me wooden box into the recycling there now.
Once it's dry, when it goes into the bag or recycling
that's fine.
bin, that's fine.
You just have to have it dry before you put it in. Don't put it in wet.
Don't put it in
But
wet.
it'll dry in the bin.
No, I think it just contaminates everything else.
Contaminates everything else.
So this is good. That we're all learning here.
We're learning. 52% of people 48% of people are like me. But anyway, we're doing our bit, and I am separating.
Only 11% of people check whether plastic is recyclable. Which is a very frustrating process, because when you do check and you realise how much stuff that you get in the supermarkets isn't, or when they say recycle it in your local supermarket, which I never understand. I don't know how one
can't.
does that.
Bottle return.
Come here, let's get. But it's fine because companies aren't putting pollution into the atmosphere at all. It's all our fault. 0896 111 111. Go on. Do you fight in the house over the recycling? Continually, I'm not doing it
in
right.
the wrong bin. Sinead
your
O'Carroll
wood.
from the Journal. Thank you so
Didn't
much.
even talk about the
Sinead.
brown bins, which are the
Oh,
real talking point.
Yes, we'll talk about that later on.
Look at her
Send your
face.
texts.
She's like, oh my God.
Alan, what else we got to look forward to?
Well, Tommy, TikTok are cracking down on problematic posts on their For You pages. We've got all the latest tech news right after this break. Thanks for staying with us. Now, from Samsung beating Apple as the world's leading smartphone producer to TikTok cracking down on problematic content on their For You page, there's lots of news coming from the world of tech.
There sure is. Joining us now to discuss the latest stories is our tech expert, Elaine Burke. Good morning.
Morning,
to you.
Elaine.
Elaine, so Samsung have now overtaken Apple as the most popular phone in the world.
Yeah, and possibly just kind of reinstated themselves in a position that they've comfortably sat in for a really long time. Apple overtook Samsung in 2023's full year sales of smartphones.
Just 2023, okay.
And the last time someone else was ahead of Samsung in the period prior to that was 2010, and it was Nokia.
Remember the little
very
Nokia
different
phones?
era. And what's quite interesting is if you look at those figures as well, when Nokia was top in 2010, it had shipped over 450 million devices that year. And the top in 2023, when it was Apple on the top, was about 230 million. So the figures of overall sales of phones are dropping.
Because they're so expensive.
Well, is it
Possibly,
because
yeah,
they're
and
better, but
you
last
probably
longer?
don't replace them longer because they're more of an investment device now as opposed to something that's just for calls and texts. They do a lot more than they used to do. And they're definitely a lot more expensive than they were in 2010.
The old Nokias and stuff as well. Like you could, they weren't cheap, but I mean,
No.
an iPhone now. I'm surprised with this. So because, is it the Western world or all Apple? Like how are Samsung the most popular, or is it just our generation? Are you an Apple phone?
No, I'm actually a
You're
Xiaomi,
Huawei? Oh,
a
you're-
Xiaomi user. Yeah,
who?
The Xiaomi is number 3 on the list. So it's actually, if you go
Xiaomi?
further
Who's
down the
they?
list, it's Samsung, Apple, Xiaomi, a Chinese brand, and then Transsion, which I doubt anyone here has ever heard of because
No.
they're
Just
the
people like
biggest
in Middle East
smartphone-
and all buy these.
biggest smartphone seller in Africa. It's a Chinese brand, but they're huge across Africa, and that's a
See,
huge
sells
growth market
millions of
for
them.
these sales. So that's where you're actually seeing the numbers go up. And Samsung and Apple are at the top, but their sales are going down overall. They just have a very strong lead, so a little drop in sales doesn't drop them out of the
Because
top.
I'm Samsung, what are you? Apple.
Oh, you're Samsung as well?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
But see, Samsung has a lot more variety in its offering. So
Okay.
Apple, just does iPhones, and there's usually a release every year of a number of new devices. But like
nothing really changes.
it's always the Apple brand, and they mostly are going for premium sales. Like the markup for Apple phones is very high, so they're not doing too badly in the number 2 position. They're not in any trouble there. But Samsung has a lot more variety. They'll have mid-range, low-range, high-range, and then they've introduced new things like flip phones and things like that, trying to capture new interest in the smartphone market.
Let's go to a new study published by DCU. So they've done some interesting research looking at the platforms of TikTok and YouTube Shorts. What have they found?
Yeah, so it's a study that's kind of replicating some previous studies that I've done before. This isn't the most robust version of this experiment that I have seen, to be totally honest. But essentially what they did was they set up accounts on YouTube Shorts and TikTok, and where they could identify, say, the gender. I think on YouTube Shorts, they allow you to identify a gender. They said it was a male account, and they set up accounts that were meant to be in the age of 16 to 18. And they monitored the content that was being recommended to those accounts. In the study, they did mention that even when they weren't actively seeking out content that was misogynistic or kind of toxic towards women and having attitudes that are purported by people such as Andrew Tate and quite popular online, they said that they were still coming across that content. But again, if you look at how
It
the
was
study
coming
was
up in
conducted,
the algorithms, was it?
but how the study was conducted, when that content did come up, they were liking it. So
right, okay.
Yeah, so you do have to look at the detail of these studies. Now, like I said, other studies have been conducted that have shown that algorithms do recommend this content, but I think there's a broader conversation to be had about the fact that this content exists because there is a massive appetite for it.
Huge,
So
yeah.
I do agree, content moderation on platforms is a huge problem and absolutely has to be addressed. But if you
But what would they been watching in the first place to the algorithms to start
but it's also
putting this
like
up?
the suppression of that content and talking about age gating and things like that. if people are seeking out that content and there's an appetite for it, they will just find it somewhere else. So we have to look at that, I think. And I think we are walking down a path where, and I do think it is important that we talk about content moderation, and it's something that I talk about on the show a lot. But if we go down this path of just scapegoating the platforms for this, we start to ignore the societal issue that this is a type of content that is quite popular. It's resonating with people. It tunes into a lot of vulnerabilities around mental health.
Right.
A lot of content around mental health starts to fall into more dangerous, problematic categories quite quickly if you're seeking out that kind of content online. And it's because you have these non-experts chiming in because it's very popular content. Why are people going online for mental health advice? Because we don't have sufficient mental health services. Like, that's why it's
and that's where they're having to go to it, and it's so easy because they're spending so much time on TikTok or YouTube Shorts. And listen, of course, if you're liking a video that's got something that could be a bit toxic, they're going to send you more of it.
And that's
encourage
exactly the problem with algorithms. You get more of the same. And if you're in maybe not your best headspace, you might seek out content that's not great for you to be consuming. But even when you start to feel better, maybe coming out of that headspace, you'll still get those recommendations because your previous behaviour triggers
it. Swallow down that dark hole.
It is worth looking at turning off recommendations engines and see how your content feeds look then. And if they're still satisfactory, just try...
Sorry, turn up recommendations.
You can turn off recommendations engines. Yeah, if you go into... Different apps have different ways of doing it, but if you Google it, you'll find out how you can turn off recommendations engines and just try and move away from what an algorithm wants you to see.
I didn't know you could do that. That's very good.
And then you can refresh it on what you want to see, because TikTok are restricting users. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is going to come into effect from mid-May, May 17th. But if you open up the TikTok up in the last week, you will have gotten an alert to say the community guidelines have changed. Now, no one will have read that. They will have just clicked OK and moved on. But what's happening is they're trying to look at limiting the amount of content that is in that problematic space that's still allowed to be on the platform. It's not quite extreme that they want to ban the accounts outright, but they're going to limit its appearance in what's called the For You page, which is what a lot of people use to browse TikTok. They scroll through For You, which is the recommendations algorithm feeding them content.
I'm going to definitely Google that recommendations thing as well. Interesting as well for what's happened over the weekend in the US is that the House of Representatives have voted to ban TikTok. It's now going then potentially to the Senate and the President. So it looks like it could happen.
Yeah, and the reason why it's likely to progress quite quickly is it's essentially been fast-tracked by being tacked on to the $95 billion package that's been signed off to go towards Ukraine and Israel. Actually, it's actually part of the same documentation.
Under the radar.
A little bit.
How did they do that?
I don't know how they managed to tack that on, but it's obviously in a way to fast track it. It's going to be challenged legally. There's still going to be a battle going on here, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's big move though. Imagine it does get banned over in America. 0896 111 111. Elaine Burke, our tech expert, thank you so much for that.
For tech's sake. Thanks very much.
Still to come this morning, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine.
Okay, there you go.
We're talking about favours, so I'm going to have to do it back to you. Are they dying out in our communities?
Les Derrick is feeling the flower power at a Tulip Festival. We'll see you back here in a few minutes. Tulip Festival.
It's time now to take a look at this morning's papers. We're going to start with the Irish Times, the headline there. Criminals found with a shotgun, Garda seized in 2009. A pump-action shotgun, which was seized by An Garda Síochána and should have been in secure storage as evidence. It got back into the hands of people involved in serious organised crime. A criminal investigation is now underway.
Serious injuries in road crashes are twice official rate. That's the front page of the Irish Independent. The number of people seriously injured in road traffic accidents is almost double the figure previously recorded. According to research by the RSA, figures show that between 2014 and 2022, there were more than 18,000 casualties hospitalised with injuries from road traffic collisions.
The Examiner's front page, 22 teens in care of state missing. Almost 30 teenagers have disappeared this year from state care, with one teenage boy, he's 14, missing for 2 months. Repeated disappearances of children from state care has sparked calls for better controls.
Take the balaclava out of our politics is the top story on the Daily Mail. In the wake of a series of sinister confrontations, political tolerance for the ongoing softly policing approach to the hard right has ended, with Justice Minister Helen McEntee coming under pressure from her coalition partners and within Fine Gael.
The Star leads with boy 7 dies in hotel pool tragedy. Tributes have been paid to 7-year-old Shay Lynch, who drowned in a hotel swimming pool while he was attending a birthday party.
Yeah, the Mayor also goes with Shay had a bright smile and a kind heart. In a statement last night, Shay's school said, "Our school community has experienced the tragic death of our beloved pupil, Shay Lynch."
The Herald's front page, a dignified and inspirational search for justice. Taoiseach Micheál Martin said a new redress scheme for the families of the victims of the Stardust disaster is something that needs to be considered in addition to a state apology.
And finally, The Sun leads with Beck Together. Victoria Beckham lines up with her fellow Spice Girls at her star-studded 50th birthday bash. There we go.
Oh, sure, that was some
Loving
party.
Can you imagine the party?
Could you imagine being at that party? Love it.
See the Spice
right now.
we were singing that earlier. I presume you'd be all over that, Al. Would you love to go and see
I
them?
love that. Yeah, that would be great.
We are discussing after the break. We were talking earlier on as well about small favours and in the community and how people are. But some people are saying with the new generation of people coming through and their fear of people saying no, people are stopping asking for favours.
I think in the States, an older neighbours still do it. Like they have your neighbours that have been living there for years, and you'll still always pop across the road or pop into them.
I think it depends where you are. I don't think it's just older people. Like, I know when I went on holidays a couple of years ago, my neighbour said, "Oh, because you have to put the bins out in the road." She was like, "Let me take them in and I'll put them out for you in a couple of days."
Yeah.
And
I'm
just
sure
naturally
younger
happens.
neighbours as well. But I just think sometimes nowadays with the way parents even are with kids and they're driving, so you don't have that sort of walking up and down the street that you used to have.
You doing the lifts and stuff, but then there's always one family who doesn't maybe, it's all
repay the favour.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, you scratch my back.
Do you want to tell us?
Better
Personal
scratch my
experience
back.
there, Tommy.
No, not Andrea said, "I'm on maternity leave with twins, and when we've had one of those sleepless nights, I text my wonderful neighbour to drop my daughter to school along with her kids. I'd be lost without the help of herself and other local mums." Exactly.
That's brilliant. That's just a local mum there, keen. Our neighbours always ask to borrow stuff, but they don't knock at the door anymore. They just stand between the wall in the garden and shout across the wall, "You wouldn't mind giving us a lend of that, would you?" So it breaks me heart Saturday morning, hearing them roaring at my dad to get a lend of the ladder.
The ladder is a big
People
deal.
don't have... If somebody in the area has a ladder...
You gotta borrow the ladder.
You borrow the ladder. Who has a ladder? Oh, Mick down the road has a ladder. But Mick! Imagine not even going around knocking, just standing in the garden.
Do you go up a ladder? Would you be any good for cleaning the gutters out?
Oh,
no, not a big ladder. I have a ladder that goes to about there. That's a small little house ladder.
We'd love to hear about the small favours, whether you still do them in your community or you don't. If sometimes it's a little bit of a hassle and you wish that you could say no, please do let us know. 089 611 111.
They kind of get too much now. Sometimes you're like, I'm always bloody doing them favours.
You're always on the go. He's
Up
always
next,
on the go.
That's what we're going to be talking. We're going to be discussing favours and if they're dying out in our local communities.
Talk to you shortly on Ireland AM.
You're very welcome back. Now, would you knock into your neighbours and ask to borrow a few tea bags, some milk? Would you ask a friend for a lift to the pub? Well, in years gone by, these might have been seen as small, harmless favours, but are they becoming a thing of the past? That's what we're asking.
A recent viral TikTok, of course, discussed the small favour economies. Can I just say, this is in America. So, we do live in a different country, in a different continent.
Don't know what you're talking about.
Because there's this thing called the small favors economy, and the idea is essentially that in the past, people used to rely on their community, their network, their neighbors for small favors. Things like rides to the airport, things like a cup of sugar, things like borrowing a dress for an event. But now, with late-stage capitalism, those things all seem like rude for us to ask because we could just do them ourselves. Like, we could just call an Uber instead of inconveniencing a friend, or we could order a dress on Amazon and have it get there tomorrow, or we could like Postmate our groceries instead of like asking around if anyone has anything. And that's actually really bad because it drives us further into isolation from each other and from our friends, which is good for literally no one except for the people who are trying to sell us stuff on our phones.
There you have it. Inconveniencing a friend.
To be fair, she's completely right.
Well, our panel of pundits are here to discuss. Please welcome comedian impressionist Kaylee Trapp, solicitor Gerald Keane, and podcaster David O'Reilly. Good morning to you all.
Morning. How are you?
So, well, I'm interested from this, Kaylee, from your point of view, because you've moved from Monaghan to Dublin. So, do you think, in terms of favours, is there a cultural divide between rural and city?
I'll give you an example that happened yesterday with this one. I was pulling my hair out all weekend, being like, is there a difference? I was leaving Monaghan to come up the road yesterday. I was 10 minutes outside, and next thing, somebody started flashing me, and I was like, oh, good man yourself, thank you. I know what's coming ahead.
Yeah.
When I was on the way to Dublin, about an hour later, I did spot a speed van, and not one person gave me a flash. So I was like, there's my answer.
They didn't give you a flash?
Not one flash. Now, I was a good girl, I was going all right.
Exactly.
But I was like, and I swear to God, that's what happened, the two examples there. So I was like, there you go, Monaghan versus
So one
Dublin.
outside Monaghan, one as you were coming into Dublin. Obviously, Gardaí, we know that that's not a thing that any of us actually do, but...
She give the flash.
But, like, honestly, that would make me a bit upset if someone didn't give you the flash.
I know. It's just they give you a flash and you give them a wee finger, and that's our communication.
Gerald, you've...
Oh, I'm sorry, Dad.
The flash could lead to anything nowadays.
Morning.
So, Gerald,
I don't know what you said there.
so you built your career on these favours.
Flashing?
Yeah, let's go.
Flashing.
Freebies.
Oh, freebies, sorry.
Yes.
Well, I think there is the professional favour giving, which applies not just in my profession, but in any. If you go into a shop and the shopkeeper gives a free little chocolate to the kid or something, it builds up, and it's a great way of networking because people go away, they feel good, they say, oh, he's a very nice fellow there. And I think that what I always try to do is, if you meet somebody for the first time, there's no fees, you say, listen, it's free. And the word passes around. So there's a kind of professional favour giver like that as well. And it shouldn't be underestimated in every professional walk of life. From being a shopkeeper to a hairdresser, you know yourself.
Yeah, but, I'm sure that you get people, ringing you up going, come here, can you give me a little bit of advice on this?
Yeah.
I don't know, give me a steer on what to do. But if it's someone going, do you know what, I'm going to do this favour if I don't want anything in return, but I'm going to do it. You think that's a bit of an issue?
Yeah, I do, yeah. I mean, I think it's great for people. We're lovely to say, we do a favour, we expect nothing in return. The vast majority of people, I believe, who do favours do expect something in return. They don't say it because it's so much better.
Yeah.
I do this out of the goodness of my heart because I love you and I want to help you and I want us to remain great friends. But at the end of the day, I need you to pay me back when I'm stuck.
Well, and I think when it comes to favours as well, it's very much I'll scratch your back, you scratch my back type thing. Like you expect, it's reciprocal.
It is very much, yeah.
And it's a relationship thing. So neighbours, if you know each other, if you didn't know the neighbour, it might be a little bit different.
Yes.
Dave, from your point of view, like you've just come back from London. So it's such a massive city, people don't really know each other so well. So would you have noticed a difference over there, say, to back home?
Oh, 100%. And let me tell you, I am at the stage now where I am sick of doing favours, and I've only been back in Ireland for 2 years. Let me tell you, from London, I have had it up to here doing favours because I just seem to be absolutely taken advantage of when it comes to that. And I think maybe I've been conditioned because in London, give an example, my mother, every time we go to London, without fail, I don't know what it is, has a little trip. We were there last weekend, she had a fall. People, I'm not word of a lie, she was like roadkill. People were stepping over the poor woman on the floor as not to inconvenience her. No one would even help stop. Now,
really?
Yeah. And I'm going to contradict myself in saying
Someone
that...
wouldn't stop to help pick her up?
There was a policeman just staring.
Oh,
and I
my
said,
God.
I was just looking at it and I said, what on earth is going on here? Now, in saying that, I would be very clear with my boundaries and saying no if I didn't want to do a favour somebody asked me to do, because I find, particularly in the arts, would you do this? It'd be great exposure. Well, hello, taxman, do you take exposure as a form of payment? Because I can't pay my bills with that. Or I find myself in situations where people are asking me to, like, an ex asked me to do him a favour, and that was sit with his dying cat. No words of a lie, and I have a terrible phobia of cats. And he asked me, and I'm thinking to myself, is this a sketch? This has to be a sketch show.
Gerald, you were the same with chickens. You had to mind your neighbours' chickens, is that right? And you have a phobia of them.
Yeah, I do, yeah, but my dog attacked the chickens and killed them. I mean, I couldn't believe that my next door neighbour was so attached. The children loved the chickens. I didn't know that. I thought they loved dogs and cats.
So what's They went on holiday, asked you to mind the chickens, yeah, and your dog killed them all?
No, about 7 of the 9 of them, I think. I mean... And then I come back, and the kids are all crying, and I'm trying to kind of, say, relax. I'll get you 40 chickens, but I didn't realise they became attached to the chicken.
Okay, we're not condoning what just happened.
No, we're not condoning.
Why did you bring the dog?
Pardon?
Why did you bring the dog?
The dog was in my garden, and I took the dog over when I was feeding the chickens. I'd never fed chickens before. It was a wonderful experience.
Okay.
The dog...
I'm worried about the cat. Was the cat okay, David, after this story here?
I mean, the cat was 22, every day was a bonus at that point. But you know what I mean? Like, and I say that with all due respect, the poor thing.
But you did mind the cat?
Oh,
it was a favour.
I did, and it was fine. I mean, I was traumatised because, you don't ever want to be in a situation where you're... This was my ex's family's prized possession.
Okay.
It was their cat of 22 years, And I just thought, that's an awful lot to put on somebody, And it was.
So, would you do something like drop someone to the airport? Like, would you do something that was a little bit more taxing than just handing over a few tea bags?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Because
I think I agree with you as earlier. You'll get it back. Like, there's no such thing as a free meal. They'll come knocking a few years later. And even I was at a wedding in Donegal at the weekend there on Friday evening, and the amount of people who offered to take me home, which is a 2-hour drive. Obviously, they were going home, but they had a spare seat, and they were just like, "Yeah, don't be stuck." So I love that.
That's lovely.
And
you had to do impressions the whole way home.
Were they all young fellas?
No, honestly.
I wouldn't be surprised. Queuing up. I'll drive you 2 hours home.
They heard about Katie flashing.
No, that's
you
the
see,
thing.
that's where my London back now gets up is. Why is a stranger offering to give you a lift home?
But you'd know them.
Yeah,
I think it's different.
No.
You take it on the chin.
Yeah.
No, I would trust them.
But I think you have moved. So when you've come from home where you knew everybody, and then you move into a rental situation in a city, that can be a bit different because you don't know your neighbours. There isn't a sense of community. I live in a place where it's loads of renters, and there's kind of no one who lives there, who owns the house. That is weird, isn't it?
It is weird, and maybe it's premature to say because I don't know my neighbours yet, and I can already get the vibe it's a lovely community, but at home I could ask my neighbour to do my tan on my back. At here I wouldn't even ask for an egg, Not yet, maybe give it time.
Not yet.
Yeah, but... We'll see. I don't want to be judgmental of it, but I feel like it's really fast moving up here, and nobody has... It seems like you just don't want to burden people and waste their time or ask people for their time up here because there's a lot going on. But who's to say there's not a lot going on at home too? I don't know.
Exactly.
Do you think has it changed? Do you see it even from your kids, Jared, that it's like the sense of rejection almost? They wouldn't even ask their friends to do stuff.
Well, I asked my daughter yesterday and her partner, do they do favours? They say, yeah, they do favours all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what you said is absolutely right. I mean, it depends on, they'll ring up their friends and they need help and they'll do that. I mean, I've asked many people to tan my back and they've all refused. But in your case, you don't seem to have a problem.
Anytime, Thursday night or Friday.
I mean, don't you be stuck either.
That's a hell of a favour, that is.
There is the WhatsApp groups when you're either in the community WhatsApp group or the community parent group WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
Like I'd say that's 190 to a gallon.
Well, I think when you have kids as well, there's a lot of things, activities, football practice and dance practice and picking and dropping. But there's always potentially someone who doesn't repay the favour. And that's when the issue starts in.
Yeah, and there's always that one person who is asking constantly for the favours, constantly. And, you kind of, that's a red flag, and they soon become known in that WhatsApp group. I mean, I'm not one for WhatsApp groups myself anyway. I would be a very firm believer in the mute button when it comes to WhatsApp groups. God, I come across very negative this morning. But, I think we should not be afraid to set our boundaries when it comes to favours. And I think
saying no.
And saying no, but I also think that's why people are maybe less likely to ask favours now, because they're embarrassed. But I don't think you should be embarrassed. If you ask someone to do a favour? And they say no. Go, fine. You move on, you ask your next person.
We would love to hear from you this morning when it comes to favours, how it works in your neighbourhood, in your community, whether you own there or rent there, if you're in the town or in the city or in the country. We'd love to hear from you.
Or if you-
6 111
Or if you're someone who you think people take advantage of, because I'd say there's always a people pleaser as well who
There
gets
is.
asked all the time.
Who gets through
Kaylee's
all
giving
that.
hope. Me.
Yeah, and if you see Kaylee on the road, remember a flash and a finger. That's what we do. Kaylee Trapp, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Cheryl Keenan, David O'Reilly, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for staying with us. Now we're in the kitchen this morning having a floral flavoured sweet treat.
Yes, Erin Bunting is here. Good morning to you,
Good
Erin.
morning, guys. How are you?
So we're having a few bickies, but with flowers on top.
Yeah, so we're going to be making these like beautiful little they're just shortbreads. So like a German biscuit, which is kind of like a traditional shortbread. This is my nanny's recipe. She's been making it for years. And it's sandwiched together with jam. But then instead of doing the kind of traditional kind of white glacé icing, and quite often you put like a
cherry or
angelica or a bit of
yeah.
cherry on top of it. I've used these little pressed flowers, which I just picked out of the garden and just
Look
pressed.
amazing.
And they look really kind of elevate it. They look really pretty. And we're also going to be talking a bit about making kind of natural food colouring. So instead of using like just normal food colouring you buy in the supermarket or something, we're going to use flowers and leaves to make the food colouring. So I'm going to just show you kind of how to do that. So we've got 3 different colours that we're using here. So I'm going to use, this is butterfly pea flower, which is like I buy it dried. It does, you can grow it here. It's called butterfly pea flower.
Butterfly pea.
Butterfly pea. It's part of the pea family.
Okay.
Where the hell would you buy
It's like
that
a tropical, it's a tropical thing, but lots of people use it in teas and things like that.
Oh,
so you just buy it dried, you know,
loose leaf tea
off
kind
the
of.
internet, yeah, like a loose leaf tea, and then it makes this kind of beautiful kind of blue colour when you soak it. And then we're also going to use a hibiscus, which is again a tropical flower. I buy it dried. Use loads in Mexican cooking. Has like kind of cranberry flavour.
Right.
And we're also going to use sorrel. And I'm just going to show you
So
how.
they're kind of just loose leaf teas. You buy them
Loose
in
leaf
a shop.
teas, you buy them in a shop that
And
sells
sorrel
that.
you can get in your garden.
And sorrel you can get just from the garden.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to show you. Basically, you just make a tea. So you've got a bit of hibiscus there. You pour in a bit of boiling water.
Right.
And leave it to infuse, for about, you can already see it going pink for about 10 minutes, or 5-10 minutes until you get the kind of colour you want. And similar with the butterfly pea flower, we just pour in a bit of boiling water there. And you can already see it going kind of blue. And it's just like a nice way of creating an icing without using kind of lots of different kind of.
So hold on, but you have to blend it, obviously. Yeah, like.
No, so these ones you just pour a bit of boiling water in, leave to infuse for a few minutes, and then once you get the colour you want, so this one's been infusing a bit longer.
Pour it in with the icing
you just
sugar.
strain it, and then you just pour it in with the icing sugar. I'll just show you how to make the sorrel one as well, because that's really interesting. And if you're a forager, or if you know a bit about like plants and things like that, you can just go and forage this in your garden, or like from the hedgerows and things like that. It grows kind of low down, and it's quite distinctive. It has these little sort of sharp points, and it has a kind of green appley flavour.
Okay, let's
Do you
have a
want to
look.
try
Can
it?
I have a look at it?
Yeah.
So you have sorrel there in.
So I've put some in just in a little like blender that goes on the top with about 100 mils of water, and I'm just going to blend it up.
And of course, you should be sort of make sure you know what you're picking.
Absolutely, make sure you know what you're picking. Go on a walk with a forager, or you know,
you can see them
real
like a green apple. People,
an apple. It does taste of apple.
People grow as a salad leaf, and then once you've got this, if you're making the sorrel one, what I would do before I actually used it,
nice, that. Is it?
I was just I would just strain it through the a little sieve.
Do you have any more sorrel there? Let Alan taste it.
I'm grand.
Alan's like, no thanks.
Taste it.
That's a little bit
It tastes really like apple.
A little kind of green appley. And then once you have your liquid,
Again, it smells
it's nice. It's a really nice flavour. It makes a really nice icing. We're just going to make like a simple glacé icing to decorate the biscuits with. So I've just got some icing sugar here, which I've sifted, because if you don't sift icing sugar, it goes a bit lumpy.
Right.
And then you just add in a few teaspoons of your liquid and just mix it together.
So you've made us. So what colours have we got? I've got the hibiscus
You've got
one
the
here, have I?
hibiscus one.
And what's Alan got?
And Alan has butterfly pea flower.
Butterfly
And he's
pea powder.
heading on with the decorating of the
starting 'cause
icing.
I'm-
So I'm just gonna show you guys how to do it. So yeah, so you just mix it until you get the kind of right
work
consistency.
away.
You don't want, I would say with glacé icing always, especially for doing something like this, a biscuit, make it thicker than you expect. You can always add a few extra drops later on because you don't want to run off the side of the biscuit.
And see on this, the German biscuit, because it's got jam in the middle of it, can you put a double layer of icing instead of jam?
You could, yeah. You could definitely put a double layer of
Whatever
icing.
you want.
You can do whatever you want. You could just do one, decorate them all with icing on top of them and
That's
not
good,
bother
isn't it? They're
sandwiching
kind of nice
together.
colours as well, aren't they? I mean, yours look fab.
We have a great time doing this.
I've had a lot of practice doing them, so I've made a lot of these for
But there's so many
events,
daisies
weddings
and stuff in the garden at the minute. Oh, that looks class, Al, doesn't it?
just dollop a little bit on, I mean, Alan doesn't even need instructions. And then these wee daisies, particularly this time of year, daisies are out in force in the lawn. So if you've got a lawn,
daisies?
Absolutely, yeah, they're
They're everywhere.
Yeah, and they're totally edible. Now, I would say if you're picking daisies to eat, pick them from a lawn where you know there hasn't been dogs
I was
or
going to
too
say
many
that,
animals
peeing and doing
or
all
anyone
their stuff.
spraying anything on their lawns. So my lawn is like wild, and I don't have a dog, so mine are all good. But yeah, just press them until they're flat, and then you dollop them
How
on.
long would you need to press the daisies for?
Well, actually, for something like this, where you're putting on the icing, just a couple of days is fine. If
Okay.
you want it to be totally dry, you probably need to press them for a week. But
That's something a bit of
this
fun
works.
with the kids, isn't it? Because, I mean, we're always looking for things to do with them. So if you even, like, because you can, I know the recipe for the biscuits is online on the Ireland website, but even if you go and buy a couple of rich teas, whatever else, or shortbreads,
and
and just stick it.
And these icings are so quick and easy to make. You know, it's just basically mixing
Now,
together.
Tommy, look at ours. There we go.
Just going off and, sorry, mine was on camera.
Yeah, there's we go. Myself and Tommy's biscuits. Look at that.
They look very posh, don't they?
Yeah.
They look really great. You guys are like,
Expert
5 stars.
Expertly
makers. There we
done.
go. Well, let's see if they taste good.
Yeah.
Here we go. Now.
Are they? Do we need to let the thing go a bit
Well,
harder?
usually if I was making them, I would let them set for a few minutes before I.
Yeah, 'cause it's-
Do you want one that's maybe one that's already set?
It's too soft. You're supposed to let them set.
Because they'll go just a little bit more
I'll
matte
just
and a
feed
little
up
bit,
more
a little bit
space
harder.
for another daisy.
And I actually I'm teaching a workshop on making these on the 24th of May in Roe Valley Art Centre just up in the North Coast. So if anyone is looking to find out
Roe
more
Valley.
about using natural food colourings and how to decorate biscuits,
What's your
check it
social
out.
media page?
You can find it on @theedibleFlower.
At the Edible Flower. And as always, a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, guys.
Aaron.
I'll go back to this one, I think.
Yeah, I'll go back and get the hard ones. And now up next, Derek's also getting budding interest in flowers. He's at the Tulip Festival. We'll see in a few minutes. Now, Derek is running amok in the Garden County this morning.
That's what we like him to do. He's having some fun at a tulip festival. Derek, how are you doing?
Running amok is right, guys. I can't believe I've got short sleeves on and it's the 22nd of April. Anyway, welcome down here. The sun is shining with us in Paris Court Estate. We're down in County Wicklow right across the morning. Head gardener Alex Slazenger. Is that right, Alex?
Oh, you pronounced it correctly. Well done.
I've been rehearsing that. Tell us about the name. Where did it come from?
Yeah, so the family was originally between Germany and Poland, a place called Silesia. And we moved then to Manchester and we started making umbrellas. So we were the Slazenger Sports Equipment. We then got the contract with Wimbledon to supply tennis balls, and everything really rolled on from there.
And then he moved here to Paris Court.
We moved here to Paris Court. Now, the reason being was sustainability. So my grandfather was a physicist and an engineer, and he saw the potential with hydropower.
So with
we've
you
got-
now as head gardener, it's come full
It's come
circle,
full
right?
circle, and sustainability really is at the core of everything we do here.
Now, talk us through the Tulip Festival here, Seth.
Yes.
It's up and running.
Yeah, so the Tulip Festival runs till the 11th of May. We've got over 30,000 tulips, botanical and hybrids. Also, though, we have bulbs. So we've got loads of naturalising bulbs, daffodils, scillias, chinodoxa, muscari, eramus. So really good pollinator plants as well, and that's the way we're going. Naturalising bulbs means you plant them once and they keep going year on year.
In terms of the tulips, I suppose we associate them with Amsterdam, right, and the tulip fields over there. I mean, it's great to see this here in Ireland now, right?
Absolutely, and look, the weather's on our side now. We
For
haven't
once.
had a good run. It felt like it's been raining since November, but we're getting a good bit of weather now, and the place is drying up. Things are starting to bloom, so it really feels like late spring, early summer.
Tulips themselves as well, good pollinator plants?
Some of them are. So the hybrids aren't great, but what's better is botanical tulips. And we're starting to introduce a lot more botanical species. They're going to naturalise over the next coming years, so we only have to plant them once and enjoy them each year.
I was coming up Beach Avenue this morning. We were talking about the weather not really on our side over the last couple of months.
Yeah.
A couple of trees have taken a hit there over the last...
They have. So the Beach Avenue, which is a tree called Fagus sylvatica, unfortunately they're past their best sell-by date. So I have planting records of 1739, so seriously old trees. So part of tree management is knowing when to take down a tree and replant. So although it looks like we're just cutting down trees, there's a really good reason.
And the estate here is quite big as well. You're talking over 1,000 acres.
Yeah, so we're about 981 acres now. We're 47 acres what we're walking around today, so plenty of area to look after.
All right, we'll come back to you and talk about sustainability, Alex, in a few moments' time. But first up, we're going to pop over here to Rosemary, aptly named, right, Rosemary?
Good morning, Derek. You're very welcome to the herbaceous border.
Yes, now you are a horticulturist and you're responsible for this herbaceous border. I mean, an unbelievable amount of hard work goes in.
There's a great concentration of plants in here. At the moment we have our tulip display and we have a lovely bit of colour that we've been waiting quite a while for.
I believe
this year.
you've been planting bulbs at 8:30 at night and in November, a dark winters now,
To
right?
get the job done, yes, absolutely.
How many are you talking are planted in terms of the tulip bulbs?
Well, we've 15,000 in here at the moment. We give them 2 years and then we take them out. But there's one little tulip that we leave. Well, we've 3 varieties of species or botanical tulip that we leave in the ground.
Which we're going to get to in a few moments' time.
Naturalise.
In terms of the colour, what's coming up now over the coming months?
Well, we have some beautiful varieties here. Le Brige, it's a member of the Triumph group. There are 15 different groups of tulips and we've examples from them all. We've Mistress, another lovely Triumph. We have Appledorn's Elite, which is from the Darwin Hybrid group. So we have a lot, and the colour is fabulous at the moment.
And then into May and June, with the peony rose coming up here behind us as well.
Yes,
I've one of those at home, beautiful.
That's right. As the tulips fade, all our other herbaceous perennials will be coming on. So we have our peonies, that'll be the next blast of colour. Beautiful pale pinks through to deep magenta.
I've a lovely double one at home now.
Oh,
It's
they're
gorgeous,
just
yeah.
beautiful. They're
Yeah,
beautiful.
gorgeous.
And we have nice handmade supports here. I've made these out of dogwood to support the peonies. So the stems and the heads grow through the side supports. And because the heads are so big and heavy, the side supports hold them up. So they act as support.
Absolutely. We're talking about botanical roses. And this is how tulips should look normally, right?
Exactly. This is more like what they look like in the wild. Now, this is a beautiful one called Honky Tonk from the Battalioni group. And it's got a lovely sulphur yellow with the pink flush on the outside. So, as I was saying earlier, we'll be leaving these in the ground and they'll naturalise. We have another lovely one to come, Bright Gem, which is kind of a more apricot colour, but it looks a little bit like that. So we have them at the front of the border because they're low. They're kind of a rockery type.
All right, Rosemary, an absolutely wonderful job, and thank you so much for all your hard work. Alex, sustainability is at your core, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've gone through a journey of sustainability. And as I said before, my grandfather started it, wanting to do hydropower, and we've recently just been certified as Ireland's first visitor attraction to be sustainable and recognised by the UN.
And that's taken a couple of years to get that.
It has,
certification.
yeah. So sustainability, it doesn't happen overnight. It's looking at techniques that we do and practices we do in the garden and how can we do that in a more sustainable manner. So it's looking at species selection. So it's looking at certain trees that are going to adapt to our climate. Our climate is changing. So we're actually getting drier. I know that's crazy to say. But, you know, the extreme drought that we get through the summer, we never used to get that before. So it's about picking species that is going to survive that and thrive.
Okay. Where can we find out more online?
So you go to our website, powscourt.com. I'd advise people to become members. Then you get all the free questions. You can ask us everything you want.
And the Tulip Festival up and running until?
11th of May.
Okay, you heard it here from Alex. It's getting drier here in Ireland. It's getting drier, right? Back to you in the studio. You wouldn't think of it all the rain we've had, but...
No, you would not think it's absolutely gorgeous down there. Fair play to them.
Absolutely gorgeous.
Beautiful
Look, imagine going around there today. Beautiful. Now, coming up, the ab-fab comic Helen Lederer will be joining us.
Renowned journalist Peter Murta tells us about his exciting expedition across the Americas.
Amazing. And we're going to hear what potential parasites may lie in our makeup bags. I'm dreading that one. We'll talk to you shortly on Ireland AM.
You're very welcome back. Earlier on, we were discussing a TikTok that talks about the new generation, that people don't do favours for people anymore, and that it was a thing of the past. But
Small favours like calling into your neighbour or getting your neighbours to do stuff.
Put the bins out, would you call in for a cup of milk or whatever
Our
else?
viewers have great neighbours.
They sure do.
They certainly do. Carmel says, some years ago I moved house and would have put my bin out before work and then would always come back and it'd be back in the evenings, and it always put me in good humour. I came home early one day and I saw an elderly lady sweeping the footpath outside, so we have an unwritten rule now that she'll do in the mornings and then I'll come home and I'll take charge in the evenings. Keep the place lovely and tidy.
That is lovely. Anna, I've done so many favours for neighbours, but I don't get anything back in return. I've lent ladders, lawnmowers, stamps, envelopes. They always expect me to have everything.
See, that's where favours, that's where people stop, because like you kind of, it's tit for tat. It has to be.
You have to give back, but it's literally like, Anna will have that.
Yeah.
Go over to Anna.
But do you not then give like a bottle of wine on a Friday
yeah,
or something
no, I
to
know,
say thank you?
Every Friday.
What about this one? We all want to move in beside Marie here. We have the best neighbours on both sides. On one side, the day we moved in 22 years ago, the wife knocked in with a tray of sandwiches, a giant flask of tea and milk and sugar. Very nice. Friends ever since. Over the last few years, the husband has plumbed in our washing machine, repaired the dishwasher, painted the front of the house, and minded the dog.
Now, Marie, you're doing well
ever.
there. I tell you, I hope you're paying them.
If somebody moved in next door to you, would you come round with like a cake or would you bring
had
a
our
gift?
neighbours for ages, and we just like. But you see, the thing is, passing and everybody's driving.
Oh yeah.
So it's literally driving in and out. So it's we never get that sense. Like when I'm home in Ballyfermot at my sister's house, there's still that real sense of them standing at a gate
at the front of the house.
Chatting, seriously.
But in Alan's estate, no one walks. They're too posh to walk.
No, but you know what I mean.
You park up and you go straight into the house.
You park up and
there's
you
no
go in.
faffing around the front of the house.
There's no like walk where you'd be lit. In Ballyfermot, seriously, you'd always see them standing at the gate.
Yeah, no, that's
standing at the gate.
Thank you so much for all the messages today.
The good weather
it
helps.
was really hearty, actually,
weather,
see that people are saying that their neighbourhoods are still so lovely. So thank you so much for those ones. Now up next, comedian and actress Helen Lederer talks memoirs and making people laugh.
Yeah, you don't want to miss it. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Now, if you're a fan of the 80s and 90s comedy sitcoms like Ab Fab, well, you're bound to know Helen Lederer.
Such a legend.
She's a legend.
Like Bottom, The Young Ones, everything. Her comedic skills have been admired for years. Before we chat to the wonderful Helen Lederer herself, her latest venture onto our screens saw her appearing as a potential love interest. Helen Lederer, by the way, for Corrie's Ken Barlow, who's in his 90s. Take a look.
Love it.
Good morning, Helen Lederer. It's lovely to have you here. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm reliving that moment. Do you think I was a little bit too keen? Cards on the table. I don't know.
William looks fantastic. It's unbelievable. How did you feel when you got the call going, how are you? Will you flirt with Ken Barlow?
Oh yes, no question asked. I mean, when you get the call for Corrie, you jump, do you not? And oh, he's so gorgeous, a lovely head of hair, and just such a charming gentleman.
Because the idea was, because I remember watching that a few weeks ago, that we all thought you were flirting with Steve, but then of course you go over and it is Ken. So when you saw that script and when they were telling you about the idea, were you actually going, is this a bit odd, or did you go, oh, this is just going to be comedy gold?
Oh, yeah, no. Well, I just thought, do you know what? Whatever the lines are, I'm going to get on that train up to Manchester and I'm going to be on those cobbles. But they're very welcoming because, of course, they do it all the time. And when you're an outsider, which is obviously how I perceive myself all the time, you know, you don't want to try hard, do you, Alan? You don't want to be try hard, but you don't want to be disinterested. It all worked out fine. I'm waiting for the call to return.
And we're hoping that that does
Yes.
indeed happen. Iconic and fantastically funny role. But you just said there you always feel like an outsider. And when I think of you, and you discuss everything so much in your new book, but when I think of you, I think you very much as a part of that comic firmament that we all grew up with, whereby women sort of moved into these comic roles. We associate you with French and Saunders. You worked with them so much, but also Fry and Laurie, Aid Edmondson, Rick Mail. Was it a big gang, or did you feel separate from people in that gang?
It wasn't a big gang because, you know, when you're at school and you always remember the people who are the year above and the year below, and you don't tend to fraternize, you know, you just know your place. And although I'm older than they are, they were about 3 years ahead, and they were already organised. So and the reason I wrote the memoir was, you know, when you're this age, you just go, did I do that? And so I've got this very passive-aggressive map at the front of the book, which actually cites the jobs I did, just in case anyone's saying, did you do that? And in those days, they didn't actually record the names of a lot of women because there weren't that many.
Yeah.
Maybe it was before Google even when I began, before the world, I don't know. And so I think it was a reminder that my route into the work was literally writing and performing my own material. And they did give me lovely jobs, and I love them. But that I was also trying to do my own thing. So it's not poor me, I was always the bridesmaid. But I do think it's quite interesting, sort of not being a star, and but being there. So I just wanted to recollect, as you were saying, Alan, like the 80s and 90s. We all love our comedy programs when we're growing up. You know, I did Monty Python. I did it because I'm old. You know, when you're in the playground. That bonding thing of, did you see that person? You know what I mean? And Ab Fab obviously made so many people happy. I was very lucky to, you know, have a little part in that.
And we'll get onto that in a minute, but your memoir is called Not That I'm Bitter, and you talk about in the book about being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the wrong time, or the right, like all of these things that happened to you, and then how it was in the 80s, that it was 3 women, French Saunders and Victoria Wood, they were being championed, they'd reached their, that was it, we've done 3, we're very forward, we don't need you anymore. And then the kind of time of, you know, how it was like, what was perceived and what you were meant to do to kind of get cast.
Yes. No, and I do worry about not that, because it's intended as a kind of ironic, you know, when you say a thing to someone and then they laugh, because obviously there's going to be a bit of not that I'm bitter, but you know, as a kind of jokey way of communicating. But I, you know, I love the women. I love their work. And of course now, as you would know, Mary, it's completely different. You can't move for brilliant women. I was on the radio with a sort of 40-year-old. These women are really brain boxes, and they just are confident, and it's normal to suggest that you would write and perform and get to commission. But in those days, it just wasn't that. Or I was rubbish. I do allow for the thought that I might be rubbish as well. So but it was doing something. I didn't do it because it was unusual. Remember when you were young and you just want to do it madly? I just wanted to be a stand-up comedian, but I didn't know that was the word. I just wanted to write and perform. So I went
and do your stuff, which you do brilliantly. And of course, then one of the biggest hits for you, and we did mention it there, was Ab Fab. But you write so beautifully in the book about, like, you've developed such a wonderful friendship over the years. But that day one in the first reading, when you walked in, you really did feel like the outsider because all these stars were there and you sort of shuffled into the room and went, hello.
Oh, my God. Absolutely. And you sort of stand by the tea urn and look really busy for as long as possible. And then you just go, I'll have a biscuit. That will take up a bit of time. And of course, all of their names began with J. I mean, they were lovely and delightful and amazing. But it is that thing, you know, it's like when you turn up for a party on your own, it's like filling the space. I find these things very amusing looking back. But the good thing was that the man at the desk ticked my name off on a clipboard when I arrived. So that was my biggest moment. But yeah, somebody rang ahead. I am supposed to be here. And my character does have a name, Catriona, which is a plus. Because when I did Naked Video, I don't know if you saw that, I was girl at the bar. So I did like 5 series of that, but I was never a name. No, too much to have a name. And that was like 10 years before Bridget Jones. So yes, not that I'm bitter. Yes, is it bitter? I'm not really bitter because I think the moral of the tale is, and I don't know if you agree with this, that you can set your cap at doing something, which when you're young and you do, and if you don't get it in that precise format, like my own sitcom, a la Miranda, Not Jealous, yes, I am, then it doesn't matter. Because you just did it and you write, you know, and you just remember it and all the disasters and the truths and things. So you don't have to get what you set out to achieve to be okay, I think.
I suppose in that regard, I can understand why you'd be like, oh, you know, women are getting their own sitcoms now. They're doing what I was doing, but it just wasn't allowed. How do you feel about the fact, and I hate to say this, but like you have paved the way?
Oh, well, it is said, but you see, I'm not a complacent person. So when I set out to do that, I'm not really that nice. So I didn't go, I really must do a nice thing for the future generation and I shall do it now and suffer accordingly. I didn't do that. But it seems historically, one looks back and you just, honestly, looking back now, and the questions people are asking me now, because the book's only just out, I'm kind of trying to stick to my gun, saying this is how it was in the 80s and 90s. It's not criticism. It's just how it is. But one thing I did do in an angry sort of way was set up Comedy Women in Print Prize because they didn't have mentors. I mean, mentor was not a word. I think it's just been invented in the last few weeks. So, so I did set up a prize to encourage a platform for witty women to write fiction. And I've heard that Ireland reads more than anyone else. You are a reading nation. And also you like to read in your sitting rooms and fewer people like to read in bed. I just found that statistic this morning to share with you.
And we do appreciate it. When it comes to per capita, tea, we're per capita, we drink the most tea and we read the most books. We're very proud of ourselves.
I love it.
So Helen, I mean, if you're a fan, as we said at the start, if you're a fan growing up in the 80s and 90s and in all the work you did, it's just a lovely read and you just get to know people I love the behind the scenes stuff and you really bring it to life beautifully.
It is fantastic.
You. I'm glad. That was my hope. My hope is, yes, there's ugly bits, not pretty bits in it, because I'd be told off if I didn't put that in. But really, I just want people to laugh at the writing, and there's no horrible stuff. You get to, as you do, get to know some of the people through some of the conversations.
It's fascinating, the pre-Me Too movement, how things were done. Your mother worked in Bletchley Park, your life in university, being at the Edinburgh Fringe. It is absolutely fascinating, a brilliant memoir and so enjoyable, especially your behind the scenes of reality TV, doing Big Brother,
Big Brother, yes.
So
Big
good.
Brother, she's going.
She's gone. The book is called Not That I'm Bitter. Incredible memoir. Helen Lederer, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
I've loved it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Really, really, really enjoyable book.
Yeah,
really, really, really enjoyable.
So many shows.
Oh, God, stop.
So many shows.
I remember Bottom so well. Now, up next, we're going to another book. Renowned journalist Peter Murtagh tells us why he decided to embark upon a great travel adventure. This is some adventure, but he did it when he retired.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. See you after this break.
Welcome back. Our next guest was a journalist for over 40 years. You would have read many of his stories, but following his retirement, he decided to take his motorbike, get out of Dodge and ride solo from, not dodgy at all, Chile to Alaska, a journey stretching 45,000 kilometres.
Yeah, it just took him 8 months, no biggie. He joins us now to tell us all about it. Please welcome Peter Murtagh. Good morning to you, Peter.
Good morning, Peter.
In the motorbike gear as well, love it. We have just asked, I mean, you retired back 2019, just pre-COVID.
Yeah.
An incredible career, 40 years in journalism. What's it like? Like, were you ready? Were you ready to kind of...
To retire?
Yeah.
I kind of yes and no. I was 66 when I actually retired, and I knew I would have to go. I probably could have stayed if I dug my heels in.
Journalism is something that you could, you know, there's
I
not
could keep going.
Yeah,
I mean, I did some freelance work afterwards, and then of course there was the trip, which I began soon afterwards, but it got caught up in COVID and I had to stop. And this whole trip was to write a book. So I've kept my hand in, but I miss it. So I was ready, but not really ready.
And I suppose the nature of journalism has changed so much in just a few years as well, and kind of doxing and everything. But let's talk about this. It's from tip to top, the journey of a lifetime from Chile to Alaska. And as you go into the front of the book, and there's the map of where you actually went.
Absolutely insane.
And I'm like, okay. Right, Mum, I'm going away for 2 weeks. It's grand. When you go to the family, how are you lads? I'm off for 8 months and I'm going to go along some of the most perilous roads in all the world. How did that go down, Peter?
Well, talked about it for a while. It's kind of sort of, I had to work on them. And because it was a lot to expect of my wife, Moira, and the children to do that. But in fairness to them, they kind of took the attitude that, look, he's determined to do this, so we just better roll with it. So they let me do it.
And because it started in COVID, so you did try to source the bike, got it over to Chile, all of a sudden COVID stopped it. You thought it would be only a few months, ended up being 2.5 years. But when you went back, the bike was there. Like, so you start off in Tierra del Fuego, southernmost tip in South America. Like, how do you mentally comprehend this? Like, did you have it plotted out where you're exactly going to go? Or was it just like, I'm over here for a certain amount of months and just going to, on my own, and just going to see where it takes me?
I didn't have it plotted out in great detail. I certainly knew that, like, when I was in Punta Arenas, I was going to go south to this place, Puerto Williams, and turn around and then head north. So I wanted to go to Torres del Paine, which is a national park. I wanted to go to El Calafate in southern Argentina, which has this incredible glacier. And then I wanted to go back over the Andes into Chile and head north. But, you know, I knew I would go to Santiago. I knew I would go into Bolivia. I knew I would go into Peru. But I didn't actually have a specific route, just a general direction, and take it as it comes. And that was part of the attraction.
And doing something like that, sort of, you have to fly by the seat of your pants because you don't know what's going to happen.
No.
There must have been issues at borders, like you must have had some tricky times.
The borders were actually okay. It's funny, you know, they're used to guys like me with bikes, and so there's a bit of customs and a bit of passport stuff, and that all works fairly smoothly. There were some tricky times. In Peru, there was a lot of political unrest when I was going through. That was difficult to negotiate. There were a couple of times in Colombia, it was a bit difficult. I got like a kind of lost on a jungle road at one stage, and that was a bit scary. You know, I wasn't sure how I was going to get out of this, but I just had to keep going and got through it.
Were you, I can imagine just your family at home, because there was news there a few years ago that two men, they were in the Amazon and they never emerged. You know, it turns out that they were murdered. Were you worried about your safety?
No, in truth, I wasn't. No, but I mean, I'm the age I am, and I've had the career I have had, and I was in quite a few riots during my career, and so, you know, I had a notion of how to handle myself, and I got some great advice beforehand from a couple of other guys who said, look, you know, if you're coming up to a situation that looks dodgy, stop the bike, take off your helmet, take off your sunglasses, get off, dismount, and walk up to whatever the problem is or whoever the person is with your hand out to shake hands. You know, and get talking, get chatting. And I had some stickers with me about my journey and about Ireland. And, you know, you give people little gifts, little presents. And the ice is broken. Yeah. And everything becomes natural, and they become really interested in you. You know, when they realise you're not a threat to them. You know, and I had a little bit of Spanish, and I'd say, you know, soy periodista, you know, soy viaje, I'm on a journey, and who are you, and blah, blah, blah. And they start getting interested in you and the bike, and, you know, you're from Ireland, you know, you know, and they want to know where it is. And so you draw a little map on the ground in the dirt, and they realise, oh, you're from over there, you know? And so, you know, people are people.
Bad things happen everywhere.
That's what's great.
Bad things happen everywhere.
It is wonderful that you have, like, and what a way to see the world. Like, you got to see it like people could only dream of. But it must have been lonely. Like, you're on your own. And because I know you celebrated your 70th birthday in a campsite in Mexico.
Well, celebrated, my 70th birthday happened.
Well, exactly. Because a moment like that, I suppose, is a big moment in terms of, like, you kind of think about your family and your wife and everything else. Like, were there times that you did miss home?
Very much so, yeah. There were, and particularly Maura. Maura is a painter, she's an artist. And so I was in a number of places that were just really beautiful. And so she's into colour and light, and she understands those things. And I was looking at amazing scenes, and I was sad and sorry that she wasn't there to enjoy those things with me.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing to have that, to want that as well. But part of your journey, you were just mentioning there before we came on, was going through the Darien Gap. So this is to get from into Panama, isn't it? From Colombia?
Is, yeah. There's no road that connects South America to Central America, and that little narrow neck that is Panama, that the Isthmus of Panama, is known as the Darien Gap. The gap being there's no route, and Darien comes from a name.
You take the bike along this? Is that the route there? We're just seeing clips of the dirt track.
That's kind of part of it, all right. It's jungle, yeah. That's right. That was. In northern Colombia, I met some migrants. There are 1,000 migrants every day crossing this bit of water, and this is where they land in a place called Capurgaña. And they walk from there into Panama, and these are people trying to get to the United States. There are people who have dreams of a better life, and like there are women your age with babies in little pouches on their tummies, kids in flip-flops, guys with their whole world in black plastic bags, and they're walking into this jungle. So I followed them as much as I could. And then
this is the route from Colombia over.
There you go. Yeah, that's the beach in Capurgaña. That's in Capurgaña.
1,000 people a day looking for a better life.
Two of those Chinese guys I got talking to, and the only thing they could tell me because of the language problem was that they were from Shanghai.
Wow.
I just thought, like, it's extraordinary.
So did you meet any other Irish people? Like, are there other Irish people doing trips like this? Like,
I did meet some other Irish people. Yeah, and in British Columbia, I met a honeymoon couple from Cork. They were, and then again in British Columbia, I met a man from Lewisburg in Mayo, where Maura and I have a house. And the guy nearly collapsed. He was looking at my number plate, and we got chatting. And he said, "I'm from Waterford." And I said, "Oh, that's near me in Wicklow." He said, "Actually, I'm from Mayo. I'm from this place called Lewisburg." And I said, "I know Lewisburg."
6 degrees, you know what's going to happen.
Small world.
The book is called From Tip to Top, The Journey of a Lifetime from Chile to Alaska. To see it through your eyes and everything, and the amount of things that you covered in this. And if you're a bike enthusiast, my God, you'll be booking the flight tomorrow. Peter Murtagh, an honour to have you, and thank you so much for telling us about your story. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Well done to you. Look forward to seeing what's next.
Absolutely.
Poor wife as well.
Maura's like, I'm off painting for 8 months.
I'm in Westport on Saturday if anybody's interested in the bookstore Tertulia Books in Westport, and giving a little talk, and then at Hinterland Festival in Kells on June the 30th.
Thank you so much, Peter. Cheers. Thank you so much. Now it's over to Alan.
Thanks very much, Miriam. Now, after the break, we're talking all things brushes and bronzers and bacteria as we find out what's hiding in your makeup bag, including what could be hiding in this. We'll see in a few minutes.
Now it's time for the stuff of nightmares. Have you ever wondered what bacterial secrets are lurking in your makeup bag? Well, prepare to be fascinated and disgusted.
Yes, slightly grossed out from lipstick to mascara. It's time to get up close and personal. Microbiologist Dr. Orla Cahill is here. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, Orla.
Because we are all a bit freaked out looking at this morning.
Okay, you tested makeup products for us from lipstick to mascaras here. Right, what's the story?
Well, with the mascara there was about 29 colonies on the mascara.
On the mascara wand?
On the wand, yeah. Now, like you'd say, well, that's not very much, is it? But at the end of the day, you don't know what kind of bacteria.
What does 29 colonies mean? What does that mean?
29 bacterial colony-forming units.
On the mascara
there. I'll
wand.
hold it there. Maybe you can see. So those little dots there
are the colonies, yeah.
So there
they
you
could
go.
Be,
You see it there.
You have naturally occurring bacteria on the conjunctiva on your eye.
Right.
However, sometimes you can get inflammation of your eyelashes, so blepharitis, or conjunctivitis, so pink eye, and that could be from those bacteria.
When should you be throwing out your mascara and lipsticks? 3 months?
3 months, yeah. Absolutely.
But even if they say on the back that they're good for 6 months, 12 months?
No, when you open the casing of a mascara, you're creating an oxygenated environment.
Yes.
So you pump the wand up and down, more oxygen goes in there. So if you've any bacteria...
Can you actually clean it? Can you get tissues and maybe keep cleaning it? Before you dab it back in?
Sometimes, but you're just going to, create issues with the product.
Then you're actually changing the product as well. So when it comes to lipsticks, which one is lipstick? This one here. I'll hold this one. I'll hold it here.
So again, lipsticks, you can see here there's a few colonies on there, 15. Really and truly, you shouldn't be getting any. But say, for example, if you've any lip infection or cold sores in particular, you should never share a lipstick, ever.
And they do. People go, lend me your lipstick.
Exactly, yeah.
Women out at night, lend me that.
Even like that, like bacterial impetigo on your lips, or if you've any,
But I sometimes use my lipstick as my blusher. No?
Oh, no.
Okay,
no,
there we go.
Okay.
A little bit of rouge tonight.
Bad thing.
Bad, yes.
Okay, so again, how long do you think for a lipstick's expiry?
Lipstick 6 months.
Because they can last years.
Yeah, but they sometimes go gooey.
Okay.
And again, the product, it's not really. Yeah. But like that, if you have a cold sore or if you have any lip infection or boils or anything like that,
you can't.
Now, we all, like women have makeup bags. Some men have makeup bags. We all the guys here have makeup bags as well, and we bring them away when we're doing stuff outside of studio. And they're not.
You swabbed the makeup bag.
Swabbed the inside of the makeup bag. It's totally covered. Totally covered. So that you couldn't even count those.
Oh
so you're talking billions there. Now you should empty and
so
do a
it's
deep
not just
clean.
the dark bits we're looking at there,
no,
the spots.
Everything.
The whole thing
because
is
it's got
bacteria.
a different colour.
No.
It's basically
what's more scary is that there were coliform bacteria, so E. coli possibly.
In your makeup bag?
Yes. Now, you should
like
never
when you hear of
keep...
E. coli, you mean really serious problems.
Now, I mean, a toilet seat is designed, the lid is designed to go down so as you don't get any aerosolized...
But this is makeup bag as well?
Yes. Now, if you keep your makeup bag in your bathroom open, near the toilet, you could, accumulate, unfortunately, the likes of E. coli. So you should do a deep clean on the makeup bag at least once a month, but freshen weekly, and empty it out, empty out the products, wash it
with shower with soap.
You could throw it into the washing machine even.
Okay.
Or
but what about something that's plastic?
If something that's plastic, antibacterial wipe.
Antibacterial wipe.
And make sure you can do that weekly or regularly.
Okay.
And the product inside as well.
And like the packets and everything, washing with bacterial wipe.
But
okay.
with the likes of say a fabric, make sure that the fabric makeup bag is completely dried out. And
Before you use it again. An antibacterial wipe for things that are plastic and put them on all of these as well. Right. Now, this is my disgusting beauty blender here.
Yes.
This is a nice clean one here. What's going on with I love a beauty blender.
I hate beauty blender.
Why?
Because they accumulate loads of bacteria, mold. Love these guys because
they're wet.
Use them wet and moist. Yeah, exactly.
Because you dampen them every day.
Exactly.
And you can see it on it, Warren.
What? It's a mold on that.
Oh, but look at it.
Yeah.
Now,
it's makeup.
Just to simulate what directly putting that beauty blender onto your face is like, I pressed it directly onto the agar, and that's what we got.
Oh my God.
What's the agar?
The agar is a media that will grow all sort of bacteria, fungi.
That bacteria is in that.
Yes.
So that has to be thoroughly washed all the time.
I wouldn't use them.
Oh, don't even use them.
No,
so you think makeup brushes?
Makeup brushes per se, provided you wash them on a very regular basis.
How often do you want them washed?
Weekly at least.
Okay, weekly. So these makeup brushes here. So don't use these at all. You think these are disgusting? Do you think hands should be used instead?
Well, I wash my hands first and then I apply my foundation.
Okay.
I don't use
any of these things.
You have some warm water here, water, and what we just have any kind of.
No, baby shampoo is much better because the bristles dry out if you use soap.
Yep. So, okay, great.
So do you put it onto the brush?
Put it onto the brush.
Right.
Pop it onto the brush.
Yeah.
Pop it into the water. give it a little bit of a, and make sure that the brush runs clear. See
Now
that?
look at the dirt coming out of there
Now
immediately.
you keep doing that until the brush runs clear,
And
the
do you think
water
you should
runs
have
clear.
one, you know those, I know it's more waste, but you know those plastic things that have the rivets on them that you can wash it up against?
they're really good
so
as
you
well.
kind of get it out.
Yeah.
How often do you wash your brushes, Mary?
I normally go about once a week.
Right,
I try
okay.
to do them once a week.
This product, actually, my local beautician gave me this. They use that on their brushes.
Yes,
they
botanical
basically-
brush cleaner.
There's grapefruit extract, seaweed extract, and every time they use the brushes, they clean the brushes with this. It dissolves the product. It makes the brushes easier.
Is that better than water?
No, not really, but
okay.
it's just kind of a precursor to washing your brushes and
Now,
making
everybody around the country, men and women who use fake tans, will know a mitt. Now look at this. Look at the dirt on this mitt. You're going, go.
Can you do a test on it for us now?
So what?
Like,
This is it. So what is? You just take this off.
You
do
take this part out.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Okay,
There
and
you
you
go.
swab
And you
there.
just swab it. So you just rub it up and down like that. And then you put it back
pop
in.
it back in. Press it down. Give it a shake.
Okay.
And if we want to see if the unit is, sorry.
You go over there, Orla.
And you just put it in here, do you?
Turn the unit on.
There you go. It's in there.
If it's not coming
Oh
on for
no!
me.
Computer says no.
Computer says no. No, it's not going to work.
It's
'cause
not
we're-
gonna work.
We're
We
running out of
don't.
time.
Anyway, they're disgusting,
But
aren't they?
What do you suggest about these? Don't use them.
put
Or
those-
use them once and...
You can put those in the washing machine.
Okay.
They can go into the washing machine. And like that, you can, you know, well, personally, you know, I do that on a regular basis because you're accumulating skin cells on these.
Do it on a regular basis. Dr. Orla Cahill, microbiologist with TU Dublin. Thank you so much for frightening the bejesus out of me. Tommy, over to you.
Over to you.
Manky, isn't it? Yes, we're diving into the world of smart assistants like Alexa and Google, Home tomorrow, and the influence they're having on our kids. All that plus lots more. We'll see you tomorrow on Ireland M from 7. Cheers.